Hey Siri, what are Pilates arms? Do you know what Pilates arms are?
They're long, skinny.
You can't say that.
Can't see what.
You can't say skinny. Welcome back. Years ago, I posted this video, which got quite a bit of backlash at the time because of the belief that weightlifting will not make you bulky. However, in recent years, thousands of transformations online would suggest otherwise, with women claiming that making the switch from weightlifting and HIIT training to Pilates and walking is what finally helped them tone up, get that lean look. Celebrities like Miley Cyrus going viral for what's now called Pilates arms. Pilates related search terms have been booming. So what is the difference between Pilates and weightlifting? Why is it that so many women who've made this shift are having a similar experience? And what makes a Pilates body? Today we're going to ask the stupid questions, share what are probably some controversial opinions, and say the inside thoughts out loud. In case you missed our last episode, last week we talked about running and weight loss, addressed the concept of a runner's body. So in case you missed that episode, definitely check it out. And before we get going, if you've tried Pilates and or weightlifting, let me know what your experience has been like, what you think of this trend. Let me know what you're thinking in the comments below.
Real quick, if you are curious about Pilates, you want to dip your toes into what it means to be a Pilates girly, but you don't want to give up weightlifting, you will love the Renew You Challenge in the Team Plans app. This is one of our most popular challenges for a reason. It is 6 weeks of training that includes a combination of weightlifting and Pilates for 3 full body workouts per week with optional core and mobility on the days in between. You can do this challenge from the gym or home. Because the workouts are done in real time, I am right there with you, coaching you through every rep of every set. There is no worrying about if your form is correct. If you want to learn more, I will put a link in the description box down below, as well as a code to save on your order.
Lean, not bulky muscle. What is the difference? Some people will say there is no difference. I think in previous videos, I've said that there's only muscle. But before you really get into that, I think you got to understand what bulky means. Bulky is subjective. The amount of muscle that one woman thinks adds a nice amount of natural shape to her body, another woman might consider to be bulky, and that's not a bad thing because you are allowed to have preferences for your body. There's that saying that another woman's beauty is not the absence of your own. I am nowhere near as muscular as I used to be. I like that for my body. I'm very comfortable in my body, but that doesn't mean that I look at a woman with more muscle than me and think she's unattractive or really honestly think anything about it. If she's happy and she feels good, I think that's great. I'm not trying to push my preferences on other women. And that's part of where I feel like we're opening a real can of worms, but that kind of ties into where skinny became a bad word. I don't know if skinny always has been a bad word. I feel like there's a whole history to the word skinny, but at least in recent years or on my own fitness and weightlifting journey, when I first got into weightlifting, that was at the peak of the strong, not skinny movement. And it was such a positive thing initially. It was encouraging women to get into weightlifting rather than just being kind of exclusively lifting, the baby weights and doing cardio and living on the treadmills. We were allowed to enter the weight session. It gave us permission to take up more space and to move our bodies in more ways. And it was really good until not too long later, it all of a sudden wasn't enough to be strong unless you were also lean, which really just felt like a variation of skinny because you were still restricting what you ate. Culturally, pop culturally, there is a pendulum that swings. And unfortunately, I feel like it's often women's bodies that are more so the subject of what is trendy because growing up, it was early 2000s, tabloids glorifying very unhealthy behaviors. I mean, literally fat shaming celebrities that there was no fat to be seen. I know that people say that social media is bad now with hate comments and gossip sites, but the celebrity tabloids of the early 2000s were a different beast.
Just be headline of like, X person got fat.
Right.
What happened?
Right. And meanwhile, it's like there's a singular roll on their stomach or their thigh, right?
It's just that sitting angle.
Growing up in the early 2000s with every of the top celebrities being super, super skinny and being critiqued for not being skinny enough, but then being critiqued for also being too skinny, and we're concerned for her health. No, you're not. To then the strong, not skinny movement, which kind of started alongside social media becoming more mainstream. So now it wasn't just celebrities that you were seeing representing this body type. It was like everybody, right? It felt more within reach because people like you and me, you were seeing on your screen, as well as celebrities who had this, what felt like a healthier and more attainable body. But now a lot of people have been predicting that we are swinging the opposite direction and we're going back to this super skinny model chic, whatever you want to call it. I'm trying not to say the words that will get YouTube flagging me. I'm not saying this is the same as that, but I do feel like a lot of people in our age group, or if you're in your maybe mid 20s to early 30s kind of range, you grew up with the tabloids, you grew up with that look being at the forefront. There is a little bit PTSD, and when you see either people who are skinny, or you hear the word skinny, or you see people who are like, they're using the word lean, but like really we're describing skinny, I think it can be a little bit triggering. And I think that's why the response from the weightlifting community to Pilates has been so heightened. It really feels like you have to pick a team. And some people who maybe don't align with the Pilates body and who do enjoy weightlifting have been taking the rise of Pilates personally. That definitely feels like something I would have done a few years ago. So bringing it back to the lean versus bulky muscle, the Pilates look, truthfully, is a combination of not a lot of muscle and not a lot of body fat. If you have more muscle and not a lot of body fat, you might have more definition to your arms. They might look more cut. I'm thinking of, what was her name in Terminator? Iconic, 80s.
Oh,
Linda?
Oh.
Yeah, what's her name? Iconic, gorgeous arms. But again, that might be considered not necessarily bulky. Linda Hamilton, not necessarily bulky, but too cut for some people who want more of a slender, long, and just kind of toned look. Whereas if you have more muscle and more body fat, that's where you might start getting into the territory of what some women would consider bulky. So why does Pilates result in a leaner look? Because you're not crazy. There are thousands of transformations, thousands of women who've made the shift from weightlifting to Pilates and who've had a similar experience. I think part of it, or at least what I've seen online, a lot of women say that they felt more inflamed, more bloated when they were doing weightlifting and higher intensity training. And while I think that could definitely account for part of it, I know when I've been lifting really heavy, when I've been training a failure, when your muscles are super sore, yes, of course, there's going to be some inflammation in your body as you're repairing, the micro tears that you're causing. But that doesn't account for all of it. As a side note, I do think that Pilates and a lot of the breathing techniques are great for digestion. As an IBS girly, I'll never miss an opportunity to mention it. You're giving me the eyes right now. As an IBS girly, a proud IBS girly, I do feel that Pilates and breath work have been amazing for my digestion, but that does not account for the scale of transformations that we're seeing. A lot of people think that it's the high reps, the light weights, it's getting that Pilates look, but I actually think it has more to do with eating and the nutrition piece and how the whole, not just culture, but the whole ecosystem around each of these activities affects your ability to eat in line with your needs. We kind of touched on this in our last episode, but different types of activities will affect your appetite differently. So doing more physical activity, doing higher intensity, more demanding physical activity, like some forms of weightlifting, running, that will definitely increase your appetite. And that's something that I don't think enough people are talking about. It's something that a lot of people, myself included, are not ready for when they start participating in these activities. And it can really throw you for a loop, especially if you are maybe trying to eat at a calorie deficit, you're trying to get lean, but then you're battling with this sharp increase in hunger and everything just feels harder. It just feels really hard. You're looking at these people online, probably looking at the Pilates girls online thinking, okay, it looks effortless for her. There must just be something wrong with my body, which that kind of attitude doesn't make anything easier. What we know is that regular physical activity in moderation, not done to the extremes, can help with appetite regulation. What it basically does is it reduces the input of external cues to eat and helps balance those with your own internal hunger cues. However, when you take activity to the extremes, when you start doing a lot of physical activity or at a high intensity, that's where your hunger is going to sharply increase. And things, I think, can get a little bit wonky. There's a period of resettling as you adjust to the demands of different physical activities. And I think the beauty of Pilates, walking, lower intensity forms of activity, is that it really strikes that balance. It's not as demanding on your body. It doesn't make your hunger that crazy. It makes it easier to interpret all of the inputs and eat mindfully, versus with more demanding forms of activity, sometimes you can just feel ravenous, right? And like you are so out of touch, you are so out of sync with your body. I definitely experienced that with running. Not to mention, there's a weird attitude around eating in the weightlifting community. There are a lot of practices that are, I don't know if normalized is the right word, but
6 protein bars in my lunch bag today so that I can
right.
eat them every.
There's a lot more. I'm struggling to articulate this, but there's a lot more. It feels like the requirements for nutrition are a lot higher once you get into the weightlifting community. There's such an emphasis on protein. Make sure you're getting enough protein. If you're not getting enough protein, then don't even bother lifting weights.
You may as well
just stop. There's all these things that are kind of baked in that you have to buy into to feel like you are doing weightlifting correctly. And a lot of those practices are not necessarily moving you in the direction of better listening to your body or eating more mindfully. I'd actually argue that they're adding more external cues, more distractions that are pulling you away from that internal compass that make it harder to figure out what you should be doing. I know for years, I don't want to say I don't even know what hunger was, but I was afraid of hunger. I was unfamiliar with hunger. I did not trust my body. I had no concept of how I should feel when I was eating. I just relied on calorie and macro targets to tell me what I should be doing, which that's a topic for another video. But I truly believe calorie and macro tracking are a short-term tool to a short-term outcome, but they are not permanent solutions. And that's, it removes you from the equation.
Of how your body is.
I shouldn't say there's no learning. There's a bit of learning, but the fact that practice is so emphasized in the weightlifting community, there's a lot more distractions from becoming in tune with your body. But I think what makes it so frustrating is that, yes, there are distractions, but it's also additional work you are having to do to achieve this body, which at this time maybe isn't even considered trendy. Not that you should be following trends with your body, but if you're trying to achieve a lean and toned physique, it feels like there's so many more steps you need to take when you are going the traditional weightlifting route, because you're micromanaging your nutrition intake. You're doing these very specific workouts that are very taxing on your body. They're making you feel inflamed, making you really tired, versus you see over grass is greener in Pilates Princess Land, just relaxed, slow, gentle, not forcing anything, doesn't really worry about what she's eating, just eats according to her body. I hated those girls when I was on my weight loss journey. I hated them. I was so jealous. I didn't get it. I thought I was built different. I thought there was something physically, genetically wrong with me. Go on, King.
It's kind of it's consistent with like an in-group thing versus an out-group thing, because...
What is an in-group versus an out-group?
Okay, so think about when people are first getting ready to go to the gym for the first time, they're nervous, they're intimidated, because they're like, oh, people are going to see me not knowing what I'm doing. That same culture fits into the eating around it, because you go online and you see not enough protein, bro.
Yeah, don't even bother.
Eating this at this time of day.
Yep.
And it makes you want to quit.
Which it is a bit ironic. There's a lot of contradictions within the fitness space, but it is a bit funny that I still feel like I have a bias toward the weightlifting community, because that's where I started. That is still my familiar place. As much as there are issues in the community, I got love. I got love for the weightlifting community, for my gym girlies. It is a bit funny that a lot of that side of the argument see themselves on a bit of a pedestal, because we're strong, not skinny. We're fueling our bodies. We're not just trying to be skinny and restricting what we eat. But I I don't know, is the micromanagement worse than the perceived restriction? I mean, if a Pilates girl
It just depends on the person, right?
it depends on the person, because I wouldn't necessarily say that every Pilates princess, every girl with a traditional Pilates body is necessarily consciously restricting. But that is an easy accusation to make you feel better about what you're doing if you're on the other side of that equation. To summarize though, why does Pilates often result in that leaner look? In terms of muscle, Pilates, truthfully, is not applying any meaningful amount of progressive overload. I mean, if it is, it's not intentional. It's not the most direct way of doing that. That's not to say that you can't build muscle with Pilates, but you're not going to build muscle as directly or as efficiently as you may with a properly structured strength training weightlifting split. In terms of body fat, I think this is the biggest piece. Pilates is probably going to make it easier to eat in line with your body's needs. So if you're going from, let's say, weightlifting, high intensity HIIT training, running, maybe a more demanding form of physical activity, and you're scaling back what you're doing, that is going to reduce the inputs that your brain is having to interpret to determine when you're hungry, how hungry you are. It's going to make you feel a little bit less ravenous. It probably will also reduce inflammation in your body. So you're going to get that double whammy of having less inflammation, less bloating, less water retention, as well as just not feeling so damn hungry. Because hunger, when I was learning how to eat more in line with my body, it was really hard to determine, if it's like out of 10, what's the right way to put this? If I'm a 6 out of 10 hungry, where 10 is like, I'm going to eat your leg. If I'm a 6 out of 10 versus an 8 out of 10, it's really hard to know, especially if you have been relying on external cues for eating, like calorie tracking, right? So Pilates, I think, just makes it a little bit easier to interpret where you're at on that scale and eat accordingly, which I would imagine contributes to a lot of these transformations that you see. Now, I promised we'd talk about the Pilates body. What makes a Pilates body?
Long.
Long. And can you still be long if you were short? Yes.
Yes.
We're height inclusive. Height inclusive. You can still look long if you were short. What else? Really putting Jeff in a dangerous position, being a man trying to describe the Pilates body. But yes, we talked about the S word, the skinny word earlier. We can, if everyone is more comfortable, we can go with toned. Is that more comfortable for everyone here? Raise your hand. We're going to call it toned. Now, in the context of being a Pilates princess, that toned look is probably going to involve a combination of not a lot of muscle and not a lot of body fat. Okay, we've established that. I have seen Pilates arms everywhere online. I don't know if it's just my For You page, but I have seen so many viral videos of girls putting on the bala bangles and doing their hair or just going about their everyday routines, trying to get Pilates arms, which that probably, for many reasons, will not be the most effective. Gaining arthritis. But I understand the sentiment. I mean, in theory, it makes sense because Pilates is about often high repetitions, time under tension. I think what we're missing when we add it to just our everyday routine is that a big part of Pilates is also intentional movement, connecting mind to muscle on those movements. And if you are not intentionally moving as you're going about, I don't know, like cooking your breakfast or doing your hair and doing everything precisely, your body's going to take the most direct route from point A to point B, which may or may not involve using the muscles that you're trying to target and putting excess strain on your joints. That's just the trainer in me. Well, this kind of brings me back to that original video that I shared. According to YouTube, I posted this video 6 years ago. I don't know if you remember this, Jeff. We were in Texas. This is when we were staying at, I think it was a Hilton. We went to film at Destination Dallas. Mm-hmm. It was another very bodybuilding gym. You were definitely intimidated when we went there.
There was a giant NFL lineman there.
Yes, very, very big boys at that gym. When I filmed that video, I was still entirely weightlifting. And some of the key points that I shared in that video were that if you wanted to lift weights and build lean, not bulky arms, you would want to switch from isolation to compound movements with less of a bicep focus and essentially do no progressive overload. Now, it's a bit funny looking back at that because I still agree with that advice. That is how I structure most of my training now. I do very limited isolation work. I don't do a lot of bicep curls or tricep exercises. Pretty much everything I do is compound exercises. You guys have heard me say it before. I am a broken record. Full body training 3 times per week. Compound movements mostly. If you're not on that split yet, what are you doing? Join the app. I'll put the link below. But that is the approach that I follow. One thing I did learn from my bodybuilding days is that the appearance of your body largely comes down to ratios, right? If you want to have the illusion of longer and leaner arms, build up your shoulders and don't do a lot of direct bicep or tricep work. I don't doubt that running has probably helped lean out my arms a bit more. It is a crazy shoulder workout when you actually start running at a pace. But what's interesting is that that kind of flies in the face of what a lot of people imagine when they think of a Pilates arm workout. You think of very small, very precise movements, a lot of bicep curls, a lot of tricep extensions. And yeah, these Pilates girls very much so have Pilates arms. But it's interesting because you can achieve that similar result by restructuring the type of weightlifting you're doing or how you're doing that weightlifting, which is why this debate, this argument, this needing to pick teams attitude is so silly to me, because there's more than one way to get to the destination you want to arrive. Of course, some ways may be more direct, maybe more efficient, maybe more preferable based on your personal preferences. But when it comes to Pilates arms, you can absolutely achieve a similar look with weightlifting versus Pilates versus I've seen a lot of runners who even have phenomenal arms. Now, what about the abs? Pilates abs. When I think of the stereotypical Pilates princess, it's not a shredded six-pack per se. I think the officially anatomical term on YouTube and online is called 11-line abs. I don't know if that's right. They call it, yes, Jeff. Jeff is giving me a very sauce look right now. I think it's called 11. It's either 11 abs or 11-line abs. And it's called that because when you look at their stomach, you have just the oblique lines. So it's like an 11. You get what I'm saying?
Here I'm trying to do the math of
Jeff is so out of the loop. He's trying to add up the number of abs. There's not 11 lines. It's not, we're not doing palm readings. We're not doing ab line readings. Jeff is not on social media. He's out of the loop on the lingo. But 11-line abs are what I think of when I think of Pilates. I'll say it, small rib cage. I do not personally have a small rib cage. Learning about different sized rib cages has genuinely ruined me. Not ruined me in that way. Initially it did. I don't have a big rib cage, but I don't have a small rib cage. And when you start noticing, those videos that you see online, you're scrolling just peacefully in your own area. And then there's one of those videos where someone on screen just banging body and every comment is drop the workout routine, drop the ab routine, drop the blah, blah, blah. And it's it's a small rib cage.
You just don't have ribs.
It's a small rib cage.
Your organs don't need to be protected.
And power to you. I have made my peace with my very medium, I don't know, is Irish, is that a common thing? I've seen a lot of people with the Irish genetic having a very similar shape to me, but me and my rib cage, we've made peace. Bringing this back into the more scientific, if you want to call it that realm, one of the big differences between Pilates and weightlifting is in terms of the emphasis on the core and the patterns of muscle recruitment on honestly every movement. One of the guiding principles of Pilates, actually 2 of them that are relevant here, are breath as well as your center. Your center, your core, is considered the powerhouse of your body in Pilates, whereas the emphasis with weightlifting is almost always first on the weight, then on how your body is moving that weight. So it's a completely different mindset and attitude toward how you're completing a movement. Why are you looking at me like this?
Never thought of it that way.
Are you just saying that, or?
No, I mean it. The emphasis of weightlifting is on the weight, and then it's just you moving the weight.
I mean, it's in the name. It's weight lifting, not body moving. Jeff's having an aha moment here.
An 80 IQ, so.
And it might seem like a small detail, but it definitely affects how you develop and the amount of control you have over your core. I won't deny somebody who does a lot of heavy deadlifting or heavy squatting is probably going to have a very strong core. I used to lift super heavy. But one thing I learned, or that at least came to my attention through pregnancy, as I went to pelvic PT and I got really into Pilates during the postpartum period, is the pattern of muscle recruitment and an awareness around all of the core muscles, not just kind of the surface level ones. One change I noticed when I actually leaned more into breath work and learned how to properly engage my deep core and pelvic floor muscles was that when I was doing something like a heavy deadlift or, any heavy compound exercise, my first focus always was the weight. I was not necessarily breathing correctly, and so the pattern of muscle recruitment would start more away from my center and would then come back to my center. It was kind of reactive almost. It would be, if I was doing something like a squat, I'd be really focused on my leg muscles and just making sure I could move the weight. And then when I'd get to the bottom of the squat and I felt, I have to keep my back straight. Okay, better correct my core, right? My core, there wasn't that awareness from the start of the range of motion. And I think that's probably part of what contributed to some of the relearning I had to do with my pelvic floor, with my breathing, with core training in general postpartum, to make sure I wasn't running into issues as I got back into weightlifting, as I got back into running. The big difference that with Pilates, everything starts from your center. Everything starts with your core. You can't move any other part of your body unless you are first initiating with that breath and proper core control. Whereas with weightlifting, maybe it is just me.
Self-conscious now.
Jeff's now self-conscious. Maybe it is just me, but my core is always more reactive to the weight versus initiating the movement.
I'm literally thinking about my workout from 2 days ago, and I'm like, oh shit, yeah, I was not thinking about that. Because I do, I'll push,
yeah,
and then I get to the
and
top,
they're like, oh,
I'm like, breathe, engage
right,
the core, and then every rep I have to remember,
right. Which, when you are in that reactive headspace, you're not engaging your muscles throughout your entire body in the correct order, but B, it's kind of a toss-up of which core muscles are going to be working. It's so reactive, it's so quick, it's not intentional, which on a very foundational level, I think results in a different development of the core muscles in someone who practices Pilates versus just heavy weightlifting. Something you'll often see people talk about online is, I started Pilates, my posture has never been better. And posture isn't just like slumped shoulders. It's also how you carry the entire center of your body. It's having your ribs properly positioned under you, not flared out. It's carrying yourself up and not having that kind of just, through your core. I think, like a plopped.
Personal attack.
It makes sense in my head. This is not a personal attack, Jeff. Add to that what we were talking about earlier and how heavy weightlifting, higher impact, higher intensity activity can absolutely lead to more inflammation in your body. And inflammation is not a bad thing. It's a necessary part of the recovery process when you're really pushing. But yeah, if you're to compare at face value, weightlifting will probably result in more inflammation in your body, especially if you're lifting heavy. Deadlifts can cause a lot of inflammation around the center of your body, whereas Pilates, it's low impact, it's often low intensity. You're often not training to the point that there is substantial recovery required that's causing inflammation in your body. And so better posture combined with better core development combined with less inflammation, you're probably going to look a little more snatched through the waist. Now we have the matter of Pilates legs. What is a Pilates leg? Long. Okay, so long is a common term here. When I think of the Pilates leg, it's a similar theme to every other thing we've talked about. It's not a ton of muscle and it's a relatively lower body fat. When you think of a muscle mommy, if you will, a gym girly, myself at my more muscular stages, you've got that visible quad sweep. If you don't know what a quad is, think of that kind of not inner. You got the part on the inside of the kneecap. This is my leg. You got the part on the inside of the kneecap. You got the outer quad sweep. You got a little bit of thickness. So you got a little bit of shape. We're not talking to the mic. We're attacking it. It's very
They don't have this.
They don't got the
They don't have this thing right
I know, they don't got what we got, that big inner thigh. And you know what? I'm going to say I got love for all the thighs. If you have got some big, juicy, quad Christmas ham around the leg. Gorgeous. Gorgeous. Okay, if you've got the like little like hot dog legs, you know, cute little hot dog legs. You take the cutesy little pictures in the summer where they're just kneeling and you take the picture and it's aesthetic and it's cute. Adorable. Okay. We love all the thighs here. But if we were to objectively speak about the muscle mommy, the Pilates girly, everything in between, you are going to see a lot less muscle definition, a lot less, I shouldn't say that, not less muscle definition, less muscle shape. You have got definition. There is not a substantial amount of shape on a Pilates leg. Now, something that I think is interesting here, because okay, well that's just about being skinny. We're gonna stay away from that one, mister. Something that's interesting though about the overall approach to training that you see in Pilates versus weightlifting is that Pilates does put a big emphasis on the smaller movements, but one big difference I even noticed was that I felt I was training through a more complete range of motion and rotation, which is interesting because there are a lot of small movements in Pilates, but you're also working at parts of the range of motion that are overlooked by traditional weightlifting. You are rotating at the hips, you are moving laterally, you're moving just in a different way, which does, in my opinion, develop a more balanced and resilient and injury-proof body. Another thing you'll often hear people say,
a lot of holding at extension.
Right. So you're developing strength through an end range of motion. You're moving in ways that may be different from how you would with weightlifting. You are building the stabilizer muscles, the little and often overlooked muscles. I have really enjoyed Pilates throughout my half marathon training and running journey. I think it's a big part of what's kept me injury free. It's really helped strengthen all those little muscles in and around my hips, as well as my feet and calf muscles. It's great for that. And it does that kind of from the get. Like that's built into the Pilates approach. Whereas when I was doing more weightlifting, it's kind of, okay, we're going to focus on the big lifts. We're going to focus on the big muscle groups. Oh, I'm starting to get pain in this area of my body. Ooh, I've got this injury. Now I'm going to go back and fill in the gaps and try to figure out how can I add in some accessory movements? How can I target maybe like my inner thigh? Because clearly I haven't been targeting that and now I've got knee pain. So that's maybe not so much to the appearance of Pilates legs, but it is something that I have noticed in terms of performance, you can even call it that, or just the overall functionality of both types of movements. And of course, this is doing some stereotyping. There are many variations of Pilates style training and of weightlifting, but if you're to look at kind of like bro weightlifting, traditional whatever versus traditional Pilates, that is, I feel like, what you'd see.
I have to say, I feel like I'm not the only one who would think this.
Yeah.
The way you're explaining Pilates, I've never like really thought about it. I want to do it. However,
does he want to be a Pilates prince?
No. It's back to my self-conscious part, where I feel like I'm not skinny enough to start it.
I get that. I think there can be. That is a funny thing because
I feel like there's probably other people who would think the same way.
When I started weightlifting, I was very, very skinny, but it kind of like I was just so small and I was really unhealthy to start my journey. It made sense for me to be in the gym because there, people just kind of register, oh, she's trying to be strong, not skinny. Got it. It's when you say it because I, with weightlifting, actually felt more self-conscious the more muscular I got and felt like I kind of fit the stereotype because, and this might just be me being crazy, but I feel like there was more judgment because I looked like I knew what I was doing that then if I did anything that maybe looked a little off to somebody, or if I wasn't lifting heavy enough or as heavy as someone would think I should be lifting based on how much muscle I had, I was more self-conscious in a gym setting as compared, maybe it was just a different type of self-conscious as compared to when I was a newbie, because when I was a newbie, I was worried that I'd look like I didn't know what I was doing. Whereas when I had more muscle and more looked like I belonged in a gym, whatever that means, but I then worried that people, they'd be more judgmental of what I was doing because of how I looked. I don't know if that makes any sort of sense.
Yeah.
But I also hear what you're saying because you feel like it's just that feeling of being out of place, of not fully fitting what you think should. be doing that form of training.
I think my brain is automatically setting Pilates as a clique.
Yeah, as a clique, as an exclusive thing.
I'm in the out group.
And I think that even speaks to a bit where I've landed now with my training, where, you know, I do a bit of everything. And I used to be self-conscious about that. I used to think it took away from me as a weightlifter, that people wouldn't really get it. But I just want to feel good in my body. I think the easiest way to describe it is functional training, but that doesn't even really do it justice, because I love what I do so much. I love my full body workouts. I love how versatile a full body split is. Every week I get to lift weights. I get to do my functional training, rotational movements, have fun nerding out over the actual mechanics of them. But I also do Pilates, and I have a blast. And I think just giving myself permission to not have to label what I'm doing and not have to fit I don't know if stereotypes are the right word, but not have to fit into any one mold, into any one space. Because also, why should you? It's literally your body. It's your fitness journey. Nobody else is having to do this except for you, which, as a side note, you're more than welcome to join me with my little Pilates whenever you want. The piece that really brings this together for me, though, and that I think adds context to the conversation and maybe helps to explain why the debate has gotten so heated, but it also feels a lot more heated coming from the weightlifting side against the Pilates side, is that the cultures are very different. And this might also have to do with just kind of the cycling that we have through trends. Weightlifting was the it girl of when did I start weightlifting? Whenever I started, 2010s. Weightlifting was the it girl of the 2010s. It got so popular. I don't feel like women have ever been so into weightlifting, and it developed its whole own subculture in a way that I don't think we've ever seen before. I mean, if you do a quick search of a gym girl starter pack on Pinterest or on, wherever you want to go, I think of pre-workout energy drinks, the hip thrust pad. I think of a gym bag. I think of crop tops, Gymshark. What are other water bottle? What are other like calorie counting? MyFitnessPal. There is a whole subculture around gym culture that is very well defined, that can be a little bit insular, that can be a little bit quickie, honestly. And like what we were talking about before with even the eating side of weightlifting community, it can feel like there are more obstacles to getting started. There are more boxes you need to check to really be into
You're gonna
that.
fail if you don't meal prep every Sunday.
Yeah, it feels like there's a lot higher expectations. It is inherently a more extreme mindset, approach. I don't know if that I'm articulating that right. And I think that's probably part of why. It's very all or nothing. That's a good way to put it. And I think that's part of why some parts of gym culture in the weightlifting community have fallen out of favor and fallen out of fashion, because the barrier to entry has gotten higher and higher. And it's expensive. We're going to come back to that, because Pilates is not cheap.
You're just eating way less.
So there's a lot of barriers to entry in terms of effort with weightlifting, and not just effort, but things you feel like you have to do to be taken seriously by that community. And I think people in more recent years have been able to see more clearly from social media that there is a point where health and fitness go different directions. And that has become more and more clear, at least on the weightlifting community side of things, where you see people that are obsessed with calorie and macro tracking, who are restricting to very low levels to get very lean in the name of aesthetics, right? I'm sure I can think of a million more examples if we kept going on this. And so I think that all contributed to it falling out of favor. And then you have something like Pilates, where, okay, yes, you've got the expensive reformer classes, crazy, exclusive, not super attainable for everybody. But then you also have mat Pilates that you can get started with just your body weight, maybe some bands, maybe a Pilates ball. It's lower intensity, it's lower impact. If you have mobility restrictions, if maybe you're newer on your fitness journey, it's something that can feel a lot less intimidating, that I think inherently celebrates women, which maybe that's like a controversial take or people might not agree, but it is catered much more to women. Whereas with weightlifting and gym culture, I think women have done a great job of entering and taking up space, but there is always going to be a bit of that tension. You are always going to see videos of uncomfortable interactions in the gym, whereas Pilates feels like an inherently female space.
Feels like a female space for sure.
It does, and there's a comfort to that. Now, I will say, one thing I've started to notice since the rise of Pilates, because I think with Pilates coming up, there's also been a subculture that is accelerated in its development around wellness. And Jeff loves this term, but the growth of the Huber woman. And Jolene Rogan. I walked into his office the other day just to say, hey, Jeff, Jolene Rogan. But there has been a movement that has been growing for men and women. But if you think of the culture around ice baths, around taking 500 million supplements per day, taping your mouth, some of these things are rooted in fact, others are not. A lot of them...
If you're not doing a weekly ketamine trip...
Okay, we might have to bleep that one for the YouTube flagging, but I hear what you're saying. That are bringing the space of wellness, which I think Pilates has become a bit intertwined with, that are moving it further and further out of reach for people. So I'm curious to see what happens over the next little bit, because a lot of these brands, a lot of these supplements, a lot of these practices that have been coming out and have been touted by very popular wellness creators, podcasters, I don't even know what you call them. They're thinly veiled behind not a lot of evidence. I mean, anyone can fly around a scientific study and say this might help, maybe. Yeah. I have some thoughts on the rise of wellness culture and how it has been...
It's a net positive.
Okay. I have some thoughts on the rise of wellness culture and how it feels like in some ways parts of it are losing the plot. It feels like we're getting closer and closer to a Patrick Bateman style routine being the baseline and necessity for everybody to live a healthy and beautiful and caring, respectful to your body life, which absolutely you do not need to be doing. But maybe if you guys want a follow-up episode doing a deep dive into wellness culture or into specific trends, we would love to review them. But okay, that's it for today. If you have experience with Pilates and or weightlifting and or anything in between, I'd love to hear what you think. If you were triggered by our conversation today, because I know Jeff was, and you know what, past me would have been too, also share that, because I think it is important to challenge your beliefs if you are feeling like you are really defensive of your team, especially when it comes to health and fitness, because there is so much to be learned through experience, through trying different things. And no judgment of myself and of other stuff held me back from doing that for so long. And I could have arrived at this place where I'm just like, I'm loving life. I'm living. I'm having a good time so much sooner. So let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about maybe an episode on those wellness trends next.
If you're on the defensive of your team or self-conscious to try something else, I'm on your side.
Jeff's on your side, so you're in good company. But thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Good.
And